Well, hello, this is Jay once again, and here we go again. It's been a little while since I've had a real frank discussion about what current events are and what the near future and future events look like, and I will do my best to get through that without taking as long as some of those other videos have. So the big event past was the fitting for a radiation mask, and I'll try to describe that experience for you. It was in the Northgate section of Seattle, which is North Seattle, if I got that right. I stopped on my way, had a bite to eat at a small cafe, cup of coffee, and arrived at the Proton Therapy Center. This was my first time being there. Big letters on the wall of the building, Fred Hutch Proton Cancer Therapy Center, or something to that effect. And I walked into the place. There were cancer patients everywhere. As you looked around the lobby, it was just full of people, presumably there to get done what I was about, the road that I was going down. They were at some point in that process, right? I don't know exactly where. I was just about to take a seat alongside of them. One of the things I noticed when I first came in is the ringing of a bell. Somebody was ding, 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 kind of like a cafeteria bell in my old Camp Mitten days. And you know, I could see a man and a woman, a young man and a woman standing there. And then the whole place broke out and clapping. Everybody in the place was clapping. And I assumed immediately that that probably meant that was the end of their treatment, but I asked the gal at the front desk, and she did confirm that that's something they do for every patient at the end of their 6 weeks or whatever it is of radiation therapy. So I'll be ringing that bell presumably at the end of mine, and no doubt get a video. So then they invited me, after I got done waiting for a little bit, I went into the process. I sat in a room like so many other of these rooms. They all look very similar. Similar chair, similar monitor, and they take your stats, blood test. You know, they get a blood pressure, some of the basic things that I think they get every visit. Somebody sat down with me and walked me through some of the expectations of what today was going to be all about. So it was a fitting for a mask, and so, you know, among the questions they asked me is, was I claustrophobic? They put an IV inside my arm for what I don't know if they call it an IV. They call it something else, a catheter, I think, so that they can both draw blood now and use it later in this process to inject the radioactive or whatever the material is that makes the CT scan imaging show up better. Once I got done with that interview process, they brought in a mask to give me an example of what the final mask looks like. And interestingly enough, the mask they brought in had a drawing of Spider-Man on the front of it. And that struck me as interesting because my brother Bill and I had recently had a conversation where he talked about the hospital he was in, and that a very young boy was going through cancer treatment, and he had just had a cancer radiation mask made, and Bill asked if he could go ahead and draw something on that for him to make it more childlike and more fun for him, because evidently the child was apprehensive about the whole procedure, and that would make it better. And I agree with that, and he did. In telling me that story, he told me that he had created a Spider-Man drawing on that boy's mask. And here I am, you know, flash forward 10 years or whatever it is, and 5 years, and there's a Spider-Man mask sitting in front of me. And Bill, I don't think you were in the corridor, so it was quite a coincidence. So then, done there, they took me into the radiation room. You know, there's the door, the big radioactive sign. They walked me through it, sit me down on the bench, and they explain the process, what they're going to do. They show me this vinyl, kind of a rectangular vinyl piece of material cut in certain areas, and they explain they're going to heat it up, they're going to apply it to my face and head and neck and shoulders, in my case, to get a good form, a mold of me, with the idea being in the future that they can keep me down and make sure I don't move even a little bit. I don't cough. I don't do anything in the middle of radiation that will cause that beam to go somewhere other than where it's supposed to. And as I went through the process, they heated it up. They brought it over to me, and this was a surprise to me. They snapped it down on the bench along where I was laying down, so it was really snug. I mean, supposed to be snug, right? But it snaps down all the way down through my shoulders, so you can't move, and you don't want to move. And before they put the mask on me, they put something in my mouth, and the idea, and it splits down the middle of my my mouth. So once it's inserted into my mouth, it forces my tongue away from where the radiation is going to take place, so that presumably my tongue doesn't get hit by the radiation. And I have heard people's tongue turning white as a result of this kind of thing, and I've heard a couple of ugly stories. So I'm glad that they're getting my tongue out of the way. And unfortunately, it seemed to have left some room at the base of my tongue, and I'm not really happy about that. So I'm hoping that the real final event has a thing that goes a little further backwards and protects that tongue more completely. So there I was on the machine with my mouth full of whatever that apparatus was, and it had a stick sticking out of it. And the lady tells me on the way out, she says, "Let us know if anything's wrong. We can hear you. Let us know if anything's wrong or you're panicking or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh." That's all I could get out. I couldn't say anything. And so then they rolled me into the donut where they're going to take a CT scan, a CAT scan, and that's the black and white imagery that presumably is to update my position on the bench in the very latest way with me snug down, and they can use that later on when they come back in to radiate me. I will tell you, even as I speak, I'm uncomfortable with the part of that where they had me pretend this is the back of my head and it's on a cushion, and then behind me is the bench. At one point, she had me pull up just a little bit, right, to make sure that my head was in the right position. And I got to thinking, well, they didn't really draw a perimeter around my head on the bench. What if I come back in later and my head is not exactly where it was when they take this whole imagery? Are they going to beam me in slightly wrong place? So I don't know about that. So when I go back, hopefully, presumably, they'll be lining things up with my anatomy in such a way that maybe they take a CT scan again and they can line things up and they know they're hitting the right spot. I'll be asking them about that just because I don't know. And I think I was in the donut for about 20 minutes, and that was maybe going back and forth a little bit to where they get this scan down, and that was a long time. I think it was actually it might have been about 15 to 18 minutes in. I noticed I could feel some fluid dripping down on my left wrist, and which is where the catheter was placed. And I thought in my mind that it was some of the radioactive fluid that they might have put in to get better imagery was dripping out onto my hand, and I could feel quite a bit of it. And so I go, I'm trying to get their attention, and finally, somebody did say, "Yeah, is everything all right?" And I'm going, so I could muster. So they came back. They came out into the room, and I explained it to them. They pulled that out of my mouth. I said, "Something's going on my left wrist. I can feel it dripping." And so they looked and they said that they don't see anything. Well, they didn't see anything. And by the way, they called it off. They said that they were done. This was good. They were at the end of it anyway. I don't know if that was a bit of a coincidence, but they said they were. And the fluid that they couldn't see, they got me up. They motioned me back to my room where I would get dressed. I went into that room, and I could see it was a clear fluid. It wasn't blood. It was something clear. And I wonder if I think they had said something about a saline solution being used in there at some point. I don't remember what for. but I could see the clear solution, whatever it was that dripped on me. And while I was sitting there, blood started to come out and fill my my taped area. So the nurse came in, or I called the nurse in. She came in, and she basically asked me if I was the one who, if I knocked it into something, which I definitely had not. And at some point seemed to call into question whether or not I did, and I didn't. It just came loose on its own. But here and there, these things happen, and it's not a big deal. So after that, they showed me the mask, what it looked like in its final form. I don't think it had hardened up completely, but it was interesting to look back at that and know that's that'll be the next step. That'll be formed around me. I'll be snapped down, and that'll be the beginning of that process. So let's talk about the next thing in my my process. There's been a big gap of nothing really being done. It's been 2.5 months since I was first diagnosed with cancer, and so that's 2.5 months that this thing's been incubating. There's no question there have been times along the way where I definitely felt real pain back in there. So I know it's kind of chewing and growing and doing whatever it's doing. I'm just hoping that it's not migrating, that it's not going somewhere else. There are times when I feel something going on further down, and I just don't know, can't tell, and I'm just along for the ride at this point. Tomorrow is my second fine needle analysis in my thyroid. So if you remember in an earlier video, they detected something in this lobe. Evidently the thyroid has 2 lobes. I didn't know that. I'm getting a lot more knowledgeable about the anatomy on both sides, and one of them is quite large compared to it's at least 3, maybe 4 times larger than the other one. And it has something inside of it. It's a gray mass. You can't tell what it is. The initial suspicions are it has nothing to do with the cancer, that it may be a cyst of some kind, but they can't rule it out. It could be cancer, so they need to get material and test it. I've gone through this once before, and if I remember correctly, they put about 6, on different sides of your numbing needles, whatever they first they put some lidocaine on the outside, then they stick the needles in there to numb the interior, and then once you feel sufficiently numb, they get out the bigger needle that goes into the thyroid, and then they pump it. It's a series of pumping actions where they're trying to suck material up this needle. And I went through all that the last time, and there was a little bit of pain, and it bruised. It bruised an area in here. That bruise lasted, my God, it must have been 2 weeks. And unfortunately, it was unsuccessful. It was all finite. They didn't have enough. They didn't have any material that mattered. Maybe because it's just a cyst and it's something else. But I got to do it again, because if they treat just this and they miss something else altogether, then obviously I'm still going to have a problem to deal with. By the way, these pictures behind me are from a place called Bokeelia Island, Florida. That area is my favorite place in the USA. I lived there for about 4 years, and the Keys are quite beautiful too, so don't get me wrong. But for me personally, it's where I've been to both places. It's just beautiful. The fishing is incredible. It's close enough to the mainland and modern conveniences that you can get there. And my children and I have both spent many years there, and I look forward to getting there again and doing some fishing, maybe having a mango, and all that kind of stuff. So moving on, after the fine needle analysis is done, and by the way, I think that pushed back my therapy another 10 days or something like that. So we've got the one oncologist who was on jury duty a while back. We have the new need for another fine needle analysis. Every one of these new tests and these happenings that extended another week, another 2 weeks, they add up. Now, I've got a date for you, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And I've probably done better than a lot of people, but I sure wish it was quicker yet. So the day following the fine needle analysis is something called a port insertion. And they gave me the option that wasn't required. Basically, they're going to stick some kind of apparatus. They're going to make a cut up in here. The port is going to go underneath the skin and stay there. They're going to thread a needle or some into one of my main veins, you know, a jugular or artery or whatever it is. They're going to, it's going to be a thick vein. There's no question. When they want to get blood or they want to drop something into my bloodstream, they're going to be able to do it. Now, I hate that idea. It makes me feel very old and infirmed very quickly. I've seen ports in people before, you know, with the clear plastic tape on the outside, and I'm like, oh God, that can't be me. But it looks like it's going to be me, because I thought about the, you know, I asked the ladies, the nurses, and I was like, how many times are you going to stick me? You know, they actually said at one point, are you a hard stick? That was the question. Did anybody ever tell you you're a hard stick? Well, I don't want to get into that. No. I said, you know, no, not recently. Not recently. And so what they're talking about is, am I hard to put a needle in? And so is it hard to find a vein? And I will say that I've never had a problem with anybody ever saying that, but recently she stuck once in the arm and didn't find it, and rather than go again in the arm, she used my hand, which the veins were pretty visible in my hand, and you might be able to see them there a little bit. But anyway, they were pretty visible that day. It varies a little bit, and she had no problem. But the chemo and some of the other stuff requires a larger vein than that in your hand, and so I think it equated to about 16 times that I would get stuck if they could find a vein every time, and if they couldn't, God knows how many it would be. And the port, they know exactly where it lives. So that's the logic behind it. I dug into it. I opted for the port. I've also found that once the port's in, it doesn't sit above the surface line. So every time that they stick you, they still have to go through your skin every time. But they know exactly they're going to hit it. There's not going to be any question about that. They know where the port is. They're going to go through it. They're going to hit it. And they'll put a little lidocaine or something on top to buffer that little bit of pain. So that's me. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.